सर्वाङ्गानि वाक् प्राणश्चक्षुश्रोत्रम् अथ बलम् इन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदम् माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्याम् मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्मास्ते मयि सन्तु ते मयि सन्तु ओम शांति 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 ओम I pray to the Divine Lord that all aspects of my personality, including my body, mind, speech, sense organs, prana shakti, the vital force, may they all become strong and function in perfect harmony. This whole physical universe, which is visible to the mind through the sense organs, is nothing other than the ultimate reality called Brahman in the Upanishads. May I not reject this truth. As I am engaged in knowing this truth, may all the virtues described in the Upanishads come to me and reside in me. All the virtues such as truthfulness, purity, straightforwardness, and strength, may all those virtues come to me and help me in striving to the utmost, to the best of my ability to experience this truth. Om peace. May there be peace and joy in our hearts, Adhyatmika Shanti. May there be peace and harmony amongst all beings, Adi Bhautika Shanti. May there be peace everywhere in nature, Adi Daivika Shanti. Good morning, and thank you very much. I'm deeply grateful for this great opportunity for me to share my humble thoughts. Today's topic is In Search of Happiness. Mostly it is based on the teachings of Bhagavan Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita on the occasion of the Krishna Janmashtami. Happiness is something that everybody is seeking. Even animals also seek happiness and comfort and safety. Happiness is the motivation for almost everything that people do. Almost everyone seeks happiness, but it seems only few really find it. Sri Ramakrishna talked about three kinds of happiness. The first kind of happiness he called worldly happiness. We'll try to understand these three kinds of happiness. First one is worldly happiness, also called Vishayananda or Vishaya Sukha. Vishaya means sense object. The second kind of happiness is the joy of worship. Bhajanananda, the joy we get when we worship God in any of the many numerous ways. The third kind of happiness is the joy of the self. The joy of self-realization, knowing one's divine nature, experiencing one's divine nature. This is called Bhajanan, and this is called Brahmananda or Atmananda. Now let us consider these three kinds of happiness one by one. First, worldly happiness, most familiar to all of us. Almost everybody tries to find happiness in many different ways. For example, acquiring wealth, property, jewelry, expensive cars, other possessions, hoping that possessions will bring happiness. The more things I possess, the greater happiness will be. That is the contention. We'll have to examine that contention. Collecting things like that. Second thing people do to find happiness is to seek happiness in relationships. in love, comfort, and pleasure in relationships, marriage, family, children, spouse, friends, relatives, parents. In relationships with these people, you try to find happiness and comfort. The third thing that people do to find happiness in the world is seeking success in some pursuit, such as science, politics, sports, business, hobbies, etc., and entertainment, travel. And the fourth kind of thing people do to find happiness is sometimes they resort to immoral, illegal activities also. That seems to, they think that brings them happiness. I remember one example. There was this Atlanta Falcons quarterback some time ago. His name was Michael Vick, I think, and he was promoting dog fighting and cockfighting, bullfighting. These are all people. Some people do to find happiness in them, but they resort to immoral, illegal, cruel means to find happiness. These dogs are trying to fight, and if they don't fight properly, he would torture them and kill them. Cruelty to animals is a punishable offense in all societies. So he was punished, he was put in jail. So that kind of thing brings happiness to some people. For us, it looks very abnormal. How can you find happiness when two animals are fighting with each other? But that's what some people do. In strange ways, people try to find happiness. The disadvantage of this kind of happiness, worldly happiness, coming from things outside, there are 5 things that problems with this kind of problem, this kind of happiness. First of all, it is fleeting, very temporary. For a short time, you find happiness, and then it fades away. Secondly, this kind of happiness is highly conditional, as in relationships. For me to find happiness in a relationship with some other person, that person must be able to reciprocate my feeling, my love. Otherwise, it will be one-sided and there is no happiness at all. And this kind of relationship is very much subject to change. All of a sudden or gradually people change, and two people who are in great love with each other, they constantly say, I love you, I love you, I love you too. Then what happens? Something, same people, but something changes, and afterwards they can't stand each other and they seek separation. That kind of happiness is highly conditional and also ephemeral, temporary. The third disadvantage is that fulfillment of this kind of desire, sensory pleasures, food and other sensory pleasures, it gives happiness for a short time, but in the long run, it ceases to give happiness. One reason is this kind of happiness depends upon the acuity of the sense organs. In old age, what happens? The sense organs lose their acuity to enjoy things. All the objects of enjoyments are there, plentifully available, but a person loses ability to enjoy. Lot of food is there, but I can't eat food. Cars are there, I cannot drive. Grandchildren and children are there, I cannot see them or hear them. So that is one disadvantage. This is what Nachiketa points out. When Yama offered to Nachiketa all kinds of things, a large kingdom, queen, music, dance, horses, elephants, chariots, a big treasury, and a long life to enjoy all these things, Nachiketa firmly rejected all those things. Nachiketa says these are very temporary. Today they are there, tomorrow they are not there. Second thing is, they deplete the ability of the sense organs to enjoy them after some time. They are very temporary. And so I don't like these things. You can keep all these things for yourself, he says. That's the next disadvantage. And the last disadvantage is this kind of happiness coming from outside objects, from property, from relationships, from possessions, from hobbies, from success in some pursuit, they are always combined with some problem. We will see, as Swamiji later says, Swami Vivekananda says, happiness presents itself before man wearing the crown of sorrow on its head. He who welcomes happiness must also welcome sorrow. There's no pure joy in any of these things that this world can offer. All of these five kinds of disadvantages of worldly happiness can be nicely seen in the story of King Yayati. The story of King Yayati, you may have heard about this story that comes both in the Bhagavatam and in the Mahabharatam. He was a king, and being a king, he had access to all kinds of resources for all kinds of enjoyment. And he married a very nice lady. Her name was Devayani. And when he married, he promised to her. She wanted him to promise to her that he will not take a second wife. Those days, kings could take more than one wife. He promised. For some time, they were very happy. But after some time, he fell in love with another lady and married her. That upset the first wife, and the first wife's father-in-law became very upset with his son-in-law. The story is long. I'm going to cut it short. The father-in-law curses Yayati. Because you broke your promise, I will curse that your youth be gone, your youth must be lost, and you will become an old man. You won't be able to enjoy anything. So Yayati became instantly an old man. He was a young man, but he became an old man. Body became the body of an old man. He could not enjoy anything. All the things are there. Kingdom is there. All pleasures are available, but he can't enjoy. But the desires were very strong. So he announces in his kingdom, anybody, any young person who is willing to trade his youth with my old age, I will give half the kingdom, etc. Nobody came forward. He thought there was going to be a long line in front of the palace, people wanting half the kingdom. No one showed up. Everybody wanted to keep their own youth for themselves. Finally, he goes to, he had 4 sons. He goes to his first son. Son, can you please give me your youth and take my old age? I'll give you half the kingdom. His son refused. I'll get the kingdom anyhow in course of time. I want to keep my youth for myself. It's your problem. You take care of it, Dad, he said. Second son said the same thing. Third son said the same thing. The fourth son was different. The fourth son said, sir, father, you can take my youth. And I don't want any kingdom. I will take your old age. So Yayati arranged the ceremony. His father-in-law made a ceremony, and Yayati got back his son's youth. And his son got his old age, and he walked away. Another lifetime, Yayati continued to enjoy all kinds of pleasures that only a king can enjoy with all the royal resources. In course of time, he became old again, body becomes old again. But still, his desires for enjoyment were as strong at the end of the second youth lifespan as they were at the beginning of the first one. They had not abated even a little bit. Being a thoughtful person, he shares his insight with his wife. It's a very famous verse in the Bhagavatam. Yayati says to his wife, Najata kama kamanam upabhogena shamyate avisha krishnavartmeva bhuya eva bhivardhate. He says to his wife, it is futile to quench the desires by fulfilling them. The more you fulfill the desires, the stronger they will become and demand more. It is as futile to quench the desires by fulfilling them as it is to try to put off a fire by pouring ghee on it. It only becomes a bigger fire. So desires cannot be fulfilled, quenched by fulfilling them. They will come back desiring, demanding more. They become stronger desires. In the Bhagavad Gita, in several places, Bhagavan Sri Krishna has clearly describe the disadvantages, shortcomings of this kind of worldly desires, sensory pleasures coming from outside objects, relationships, property, possessions and accomplishments, power, position, etc. He says very clearly in the fifth chapter, there's a very famous verse in chapter 5, verse 22. There he says, this kind of worldly enjoyment, they will eventually cause only disillusionment, unhappiness, disappointment, disillusionment. For a time, they may be providing pleasure, but eventually they cause only disillusionment. And they have a beginning and an end. They are temporary, they are fleeting. Sometimes they may last for a little longer, but they will end sooner or later. A wise person does not take any delight in such worldly pleasures. Again, in the 8th chapter, Sri Krishna calls this world as a house of misery, impermanent house of misery. Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. Dukkhalayam means house of misery. Ashashvatam means temporary place. Everything ends at some time or other. The 9th chapter is again referred to this world as an impermanent, joyless place. Anityam asukam lokam. Anityam means temporary, not permanent. Asukha means there is no happiness in this world. The Lord who created this world himself is saying that there is no happiness in this world, and all of us are trying to find happiness in this world where it cannot be found. Sri Ramakrishna said, this from the Gospel, Sri Ramakrishna said, the world is like a hog plume. The hog plume has only pit and skin, and after eating it, you suffer from colic. Swami Vivekananda said, happiness presents itself before man wearing already at that one, wearing a crown of happiness, wearing a crown of sorrow on its head. He who welcomes happiness must also welcome sorrow. So those are the disadvantages of worldly happiness. Now we go to the second kind of happiness, the joy of worship, bhajanananda. The joy of worship is one that one experiences when one worships God in any of the many possible ways. Traditionally, 4 kinds of worship are described in the scriptures. Swamiji added a 5th one. We will come to that later. The 4 traditional kinds of worship are, first is ritualistic worship. Pratima puja. Pratima puja. Pratima means a symbol, a representation. It can be a photograph, it can be an image made of clay or an alloy or gold or silver or some other material, or it can be some formless symbol like a saligramma stone. It can be any, or a shivalinga, or any of the different kinds of images. We can invoke the divine presence in them and offer all kinds of worship. Ritualistic worship can be very simple with only 5 items or 10 items or 16 items. In some temples in India, they do 64 kinds of offerings. Puja worshipping, extending over several days, including taking the idol in a procession on a chariot or on a horseback or in a back of the elephant. All detailed kinds of offerings are offered. Those are all ritualistic worship. Second kind of worship is japa stotra adi madhyama. Japa stotra. Stotra means chanting hymns describing the glories of God. Japa means repetition of the name of God or a mantra over and over again. This is second kind of worship. The third kind of worship is manasi puja, mental worship or meditation on the forms and glories of God with form of any avatar, incarnation, or a great saint or a Mahatma. Meditation is the third kind of worship. Fourth kind of worship is called Soham Puja. Soham means I am he. Meditating on the identity of the individual self with the divine self. I am that or I am he. Soham Puja. That is very difficult, and Sri Ramakrishna says for this Kali Yuga, I am he is not appropriate, because people's lives are almost always dependent upon food, and there are so many distractions, and that requires great degree of concentration and strong sense of renunciation. So that is not suitable, but some people still follow the Soham Puja, I am he. Japa or repetition of mantra is very common in our Vedanta Hindu tradition. It is also common in Buddhism. And in some denominations of Christianity also it is there, but not very common. Some years ago, I came across a very fine book written by a Russian pilgrim. It's called The Way of the Pilgrim, and the Pilgrim Continues the Way. The Way of the Pilgrim describes how a Russian seeker, a very common peasant, not a highly educated man, how he somehow got initiated into the Jesus mantra. Jesus mantra is one of the few mantras that Christians have. Jesus mantra is, Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. That's the mantra. Another version of that mantra is, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. So he got initiated by a Christian monk into that mantra, and he went on repeating the mantra almost all the time. The teacher first told him, when he gave the mantra initiation, he told this peasant, his name is not known. He wrote a journal, diary, and he didn't put his name, and that's what we have. It's published in the form of a book. So the teacher told him, the Russian Christian monk, repeat the mantra 3,000 times every day. So this young man, peasant, went and repeated the mantra that he was given 3,000 times every day. And in the beginning, it was very difficult. He encountered the same problems that we all encountered when he sat for japa. His mind wandered, and his headache, and his backache, and knee pain, and same kinds of problems we all encountered. He also encountered, but he persisted. After 2 weeks, he goes back to the teacher and says, I repeated the mantra 3,000 times every day, or now what should I do? The teacher says, repeat the mantra 6,000 times every day for 2 more weeks. He did that one. Then he goes back. Then now it has become a little bit easier. Without much effort, he could repeat the mantra 6,000 times every day. In Christian tradition, mantra repetition is also there. Then after 2 weeks, he went back to the teacher. Teacher said, repeat the mantra 12,000 times every day. Every time he went back, you are increasing the prescription by 100%. So this man repeated the mantra for 12,000 times every day for 2 more weeks, and he went back to the teacher. The teacher says, now you don't have to keep track of the number of the repetitions. You repeat the mantra all the time, and you don't have to come back to me. I don't have any more instructions to give. The next instruction will come to you from within yourself. So this man went on repeating the mantra. It became automatic. The mantra was going on its own in his mind without his effort, even in sleep. It's called ajapa japa. Without effort, mantra was going on all the time in his mantra. He writes all his fantastic experiences during his journey in his diary, and those experiences are described in his book, The Way of the Pilgrim. So in some Christian denominations, the mantra repetition is also very common. So any combination of these above 4 kinds of worship will bring enormous joy and paves the way for the ultimate joy of the self, the third kind of joy, happiness, which we are going to discuss, the joy of the self, or Atmananda, Brahmananda. The worldly pleasures, sensory pleasures that deplete the sense organs, they are very temporary, and after some time the person becomes unable to enjoy them, even if all the facilities are there. But in the case of the joy of worship, they don't deplete the sense organs. They will bring great peace of mind and joy. Sri Ramakrishna used to sing songs, Ram Prasad song and Kamalakanta song, and you would go into ecstasy. You dance in ecstasy. When Narendra or some other devotee sang devotional song, Sri Ramakrishna would go into ecstasy, bring him enormous joy. So there is no disadvantage in the joy of the worship, but it's also not permanent, because in old age it becomes difficult to even do japa because of physical problems. But the practice of devotional practice in any of these ways, or some combination thereof, will pave the way for the joy of the self, which is the highest one. Sri Ramakrishna said, the gospel, this is called Bhajanananda. Bhajana means worship, the bliss of devotees in the worship of God. Through worship, devotees receive grace of God, and then they receive his vision. Then they enjoy Brahmananda, the bliss of Brahman. Chanting the names and singing the glories of God, unlike ritualistic worship, requires no paraphernalia or chanting of their own. They don't have to be in Sanskrit, they can be in any language. Anytime, any place, in any condition, one can chant the name of the Lord. There are no rules prescribed for chanting the name of the Lord. Narada, the great sage Narada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they all have given instructions on how to chant the name of the Lord. They say there are no rules for chanting the name of the God. But for doing ritualistic worship, there are certain rules. There are strict rules. You have to take bath and to change your clothes, and you have to assemble all the numerous paraphernalia required for the worship, and to chant the mantras in Sanskrit. But there are no such requirements for chanting the name of the Lord. Anybody can do it at any place, at any time, even when they are traveling, in any condition. Now, there are numerous sources for chanting the hymns describing the glories of God. The Vedas have many hymns. For example, the very famous Purusha Suktam, Durga Suktam, Devi Suktam, Rudram, Chamakam, they all are Vedic hymns. Many people chant them every day in their homes or in the temples. It's a common practice in certain parts of India. Vedas are sources of hymns. The Puranas also contain numerous hymns. The most famous hymn coming from a Purana is the Chandi. It is very common in Bengal and other parts of India. Chandi has two other names, Durga Saptashati, 700 verses of describing the glories of Divine Mother Durga, and also Devi Mahatmyam, the glory of the Divine Mother, also called commonly Chandi. That comes from the Markandeya Purana. And there are so many lists of names. This is probably unique to Hinduism. There are what are called Sahasranama. Sahasra means 1,000, Nama means name. Lists of Sahasranama, 1,000 names of all the deities are there. Rama Sahasranama, 1,000 names of Rama. Krishna Sahasranama, 1,000 names of Krishna. Vishnu Sahasranama, 1,000 names of Vishnu. Lalita Sahasranama, Shiva Sahasranama, Durga Sahasranama, Hanuman Sahasranama, you name it. All deities have lists of 1,000 names. Numerous are the names of God, describing the numerous glories of God. They are commonly chanted. The most common Sahasranama chanted most often in homes and temples is Vishnu Sahasranama. That comes from the Mahabharata epic. The epics Mahabharata and Ramayana also have many hymns in them. The most famous hymn from the Ramayana is the Aditya Hridayam. In the Ramayana, what happened? When the war was taking place between Rama's army and Ravana's army in Sri Lanka, at first the armies were fighting with each other. Rama's army of monkeys, they were fighting with Ravana's armies. But finally, Rama came face to face with Ravana. And Sri Rama saw Ravana with 10 heads and 20 arms and all the weapons. Even Sri Rama also lost his confidence temporarily. What happened? Something like what happened to Arjuna when he faced the Kauravas 18 divisions. Something similar happened to Sri Rama also, the Lord himself. He also became diffident, lost his confidence temporarily. The great sage Agastya was watching all this. He was watching the war. So Agastya noticed Rama's loss of confidence. Agastya teaches him a short hymn with 32 stanzas called Aditya Hridayam. Aditya means the sun. Aditya Hridayam means a hymn in praise of describing the glories of the Lord Sun, source of all energy. So Sri Rama chants this Aditya Hridayam taught to him by great sage Agastya 3 times and James Baxter's conference, and then the war is quickly over. So there, the epics also have numerous hymns in them. And besides this, we have I can say without any fear of contradiction, that we have the richest heritage, spiritual heritage of hymns and devotional songs. Numerous sages in all parts of India, in all centuries, they have composed devotional songs in their own regional languages. Too numerous to mention. In Bengal, we can read in the Gospel, Sri Ramakrishna used to, and other devotees used to sing the songs composed by Ram Prasad, Kamala Kanta, and other great singing saints. In different parts of India, numerous saints have composed similar devotional songs. Numerous saints in Maharashtra, in Tamil Nadu, they all have composed songs, devotional songs, and singing any of them will purify the mind. It's also a kind of worship, chanting hymns and doing the japa. That's very common in all parts of India. Worship of any kind, unlike the joy of worship, unlike worldly pleasures, does not agitate the mind. It makes the mind peaceful and brings joy, and it acts as a bridge between worldly pleasures and takes us to the joy of the self, the highest kind of joy. Now we go to the third kind of happiness, the joy of the self, also called Brahmananda or Atmananda. The Upanishads declare that the real, intrinsic, eternal, infinite happiness can be found only in the self present within each one of us, not in the world outside. In his lecture entitled The Real Nature of Man, delivered in London, Swamiji said like this: happiness is what everyone is looking for, but the majority seek it in things which are evanescent and not real. No happiness was ever found in the senses. There never was a person who found happiness in the senses or in the enjoyment of the senses. Happiness is only found in the spirit. Worldly pleasures, as we saw, are fleeting, highly uncertain, highly conditional, but the joy of worship, while also temporary, purifies the mind and paves the way for the joy of the self. The infinite, inexpressible nature of the self, joy of the self, Brahmananda, cannot be expressed in words. Sri Ramakrishna used to go into Samadhi almost every day, several times a day sometimes, when he heard somebody sing a devotional song. And people would ask him, Thakur, what happens? What do you feel when you go into Samadhi? He couldn't explain. He would hold his hand like this near his throat, on his throat, and he would say, Divine Mother is preventing me from saying that. That means the joy is intensely personal experience. Even ordinary worldly experience also cannot be expressed in words. For example, if there is a person who has never had a child, how can you understand the joy of a mother who holds her baby to her bosom, the joy that she experiences? How can she explain in words to the person who does not have that experience? Sri Ramakrishna gives this example. In a family, there was a young lady, she was married, recently married, and sometimes the son-in-law used to come, and when the son-in-law came, everybody would be happy. The married young lady had a younger sister, 5-6-year-old girl. And the younger sister asked her older sister, when that person comes, brother-in-law comes, he becomes so happy, everybody is happy. What kind of happiness is this? How can the married lady explain that happiness that she gets when the husband visits? to the little child. She said, no, you can't understand now. When you have to grow up and you get married, you will also understand the nature of happiness. Like this, the joy of the self is ineffable, cannot be explained in words. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a very nice graphic description of the infinite nature of the joy of the self. There's not enough time, but I'll give a shorter version of that one. The Taittiriya Upanishad, this sage says, the nature of the infinite nature of the joy of the self, Brahmananda, cannot be put in words. Why? He gives this explanation. Imagine there is a young man, strong, well-built, healthy young man, well-educated, and he has access to the wealth of the whole world. Hypothetical, there is no such person is possible in reality. But imagine such a person. And how much happiness that person can give. He has the whole wealth of the whole world. Young and strong, educated, and in good health and sound body and mind. Imagine the happiness he can get, maybe 1 unit of human happiness. That's 1 unit. How much small fraction of that we ordinary people have? Very little. Supposing such a person is there. Then multiply that by 100 times, that becomes the joy of the Manusha Gandharva, beings little bit higher higher than human beings in the higher levels of existence. Manusha Gandharva. Gandharvas are 2 kinds. Manusha Gandharva, Deva Gandharva. In Gandharva Loka also there are 2 levels of Gandharvas. One relate closer to the human beings, Manusha Gandharva. One closer to the gods above them, Deva Gandharva. So 1 unit of such a human being's happiness, 100 units of such a human being's happiness is 1 unit of Manusha Gandharva happiness. Multiply that by 100. 100 units of Manusha Gandharva happiness is equal to 1 unit of Deva Gandharva happiness. Then multiply that by Deva Gandharva happiness 1 unit into 100 times, and that becomes 1 unit of the God Deva Ananda, those gods who live in the higher realms, in the various lokas, Indra Loka, all those things. Multiply that 100 times the happiness of the Devas Ananda, and that becomes 1 unit of Indra's Ananda. Indra is the head of all the gods. Multiply Indra's Ananda by 100 times, that becomes 1 unit of Brihaspati's. Brihaspati is Indra's teacher, his unit, 1 unit of happiness. Multiply that by 100, and that becomes 1 unit of Brahma's Ananda, Brahma the creator. And if you keep on doing that, there is no way to quantify the happiness that the joy of knowing the self comes. It is impossible to put it in words. It is infinite and it is unconditional. It is intrinsic, because the divine presence is in every one of us. We all can have access to that. It is intrinsic. Other kinds of happiness have to come from outside sources. They are undependable. But this we don't have to go anywhere. It is already hidden within us, but we have to experience it. We have to remove the covering of ignorance that covers this one. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, in many places, Sri Krishna says that the same divine presence is present in all. God is present in everyone. That comes in many places in the Gita. One place where Sri Krishna says in 13th chapter, verse number 27, there Sri Krishna says, Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram. Sarveshu bhuteshu, in all the beings, Samam tishtantam parameshwaram. The Supreme Lord is present in the same way. Not more in some, not less in some. But why there is so much difference between one person and another person? The difference is because of the ability of the people to reflect and feel and reflect the divine presence varies from person to person. It's just like sunlight falling on all the objects to the same extent. Some objects can reflect sunlight, almost all the light they receive, they reflect back. They are very bright objects, like a piece of glass or a mirror. Some objects are so dull, unpolished, although same amount of sunlight falls on them, they cannot reflect much of the sunlight. People are like that. Same divine presence is there in the same way. Incidentally, this Sloka 1327 in the Gita was one of Swamiji's favorite verses. He liked that verse very much. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram. So therefore, since he is present in all the beings, everybody has access to that divine joy is present within us even now. And everybody's birthright it is to experience that joy. Because you own it. We are that eventually. Excuse me. It is not something that is absent now. The divine joy, Brahmananda, is not something absent in us now. Something that is to be acquired by effort. That's not the case. If something is absent and has to be acquired by effort, then that thing is going to be finite. Because all effort is finite in duration and magnitude. Therefore, anything acquired by effort, which is not present now, is going to be finite in time and duration and also in magnitude. Atmananda is not like that. It is intrinsic, even now present, always present, can never be lost. That is the highest kind of joy. When one experiences the bliss of the self by divine grace, one becomes permanently free from all limitations and all sufferings for all time to come. That is the highest flight of human achievement. In one verse in the 6th chapter, verse number 22, Bhagavan Sri Krishna says, if one is established in the divine joy in Brahmananda, then no adversity, calamity, no matter how serious, can touch that person, can perturb that person. That's the highest that anybody can achieve, highest flight of human achievement. The verse number is 22 in chapter 6. There Bhagavan Sri Krishna says, Yam labdva cha param labham manyate no nikam tataha yasmin stito na dukkhena guruna api vichalyate. Guruna api dukkhena na vichalyate. Even by the severest of calamities, such a person established in divine joy cannot be perturbed, cannot be affected, it does not move such a person. Sri Ramakrishna explained this, the joy of the self, based on his experience in this way. The realization of God gives 10 million times more happiness than the most intense pleasure one can get on the physical plane. Swamiji said also, from the complete works, this is in volume 5, Swamiji said, it is the same happiness as in everything else, but when a man seeks it in something which is finite, he gets only a spark of it, just a drop of that. For example, Swamiji gives this example. A thief, when he steals, gets the same happiness as the man who finds it in God. But the thief gets only a little drop of it with a mass of misery accompanying it. The man who finds happiness in God experiences infinite, eternal, unchangeable joy for all time to come. Now, the last point that I had in my outline, but we are not going to discuss, is how to achieve this bliss of this self. This has to be a topic for another talk. Hindu scriptures from the Upanishads and the Puranas downwards, until the teachings of all numerous saints and sages in all parts of India, all centuries, have described various spiritual practices convenient or appropriate for the time and place in which they were giving their teachings to reach the same goal. Swamiji talked about the 4 yogas. Any combination of these disciplines, spiritual practices, devotional practices, will take us to the same ultimate goal. But this has to be done preferably under the guidance of a teacher. So we'll stop here. We still have about 13 minutes. We can take questions now.
Very good. Thank you, Maharaj. Do we have any questions coming through chat or through raised hands?
I don't have any chat here in my screen.
Oh, I do, Maharaj. I would just, as the host I have. Let me start questions by asking you. So often we get the question in this time of COVID. It's a time of anxiety, and people are losing their jobs, and some people are coming down with dreadful illness that's prolonged.
Yes.
What word of advice, Swami, to touch these people who are suffering so? How can a little bit of happiness come into
All
their
kinds
lives?
of problems. Yeah. COVID is the one most urgent, immediate right now. But there are all kinds of problems in this society and in other societies too. There are numerous problems. But we have to do three different things to face these problems confronting us. First thing we have to do is to take preventive measures. Preventive measures such as taking vaccines in the case of the, it's not available yet, but for other diseases we have vaccines when it becomes available. Buying health insurance and following the rules of health and exercise and sleep and food, all those are common knowledge. Preventive measure to prevent the occurrence of any problem, foresee. Second thing is when the problem does occur, in spite of taking preventive measures, problems do occur. Then second thing we have to do is to try all the available remedial measures. When disease does come, we go to a doctor, take medical advice. Some other problem comes, we go to the appropriate person. If the plumbing system fails, we go to call the plumber, electric problem, health problem, go to the doctor, and remedial measures. Whatever remedial measures are available, we have to exhaust all of them. Two things. Even after taking all the preventive measures and the remedial measures, problems still persist. New problem will come, or the old problem, part of it may stay or it may not go away. Then third thing we have to do after exhausting everything is to practice forbearance and prayer. Prayer, of course, should be done at all times. Prayer, seeking divine grace, and practice forbearance. What cannot be cured has to be endured. Forbearance means bearing all difficulties which cannot be prevented or remedied without complaining, without lamenting. In the Viveka Chodamani, Shankara describes forbearance, titiksha, in this way. Sahanam sarvadukhanam apratikara purvakam chinta vilaparahitam sa titiksha nigadyate. Sarvadukhanam sahanam means bearing all kinds of problems, suffering, cannot be prevented or remedied. How? Without taking revenge. Apratikara purvakam. That will only compound the problem. Second thing is chinta rahitam, without brooding about the past, oh, this happened, brooding out all old problems that happened 20 years ago, that happened 10 years ago or yesterday, or being anxious about the future, this may happen, that may happen tomorrow, next month, without brooding and without complaining. Vilapa means lamentation. All the time talking about our problems to everybody will only make it worse. So without brooding, anxiety, and worrying and lamentation, we have to bear calmly all the difficulties that cannot be prevented or remedied. And prayer, of course, is all the time, seeking divine grace.
It seems, Maharaj, that this formula for happiness also includes an element of resilience and strength. Resilience not to try to combat something that we cannot change. So to find resources to go around that. And strength, forbearance, an element of strength is needed to forbear. Can you speak to those two, this resilience and forbearance, and any other elements that come into this happiness quotient?
Resilience and strength.
Yes.
Strength, I can say, Swami Vivekananda almost all in all the lectures somehow brought the topic of strength. Without strength, strength means not brute strength, physical strength. That can be destructive. In the Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, verse number 11, Bhagavan Sri Krishna says, strength must be free from kama raga, from attachment and other impurities such as cruelty and violence. Strength must be combined with sattvic qualities such as compassion, understanding, and wisdom. Then it is constructive. Brute strength cannot be, is temporary. It will not be there. With age, it will diminish rapidly. And brute strength can be also destructive. So that is, strength is very necessary. In the Upanishad also, there is mention of strength. Without strength, a person cannot make any progress, not only in the worldly life, but in spiritual life also strength is necessary. In the Katha Upanishads, it says, Nayam Atma Balahine Labhya, famous statement. Yes, so Atman cannot be experienced by a weak person. Strength is necessary. Strength can be acquired. Physical strength, of course, we are familiar with the rules of physical strength. Mental strength and spiritual strength by prayer. Prayer brings strength, gives us strength. See, Hanuman got all his strength by taking the name of Rama. Rama himself had to have a bridge to cross to Sri Lanka, but Hanuman could fly over it. Simply take his source of strength was Rama's name. That's the only source of his strength. So God's source of infinite strength. Prayer brings us strength.
Very beautiful. We have a question from Anushka. Lakshmi, can you unmute her, please?
Sure, Mother. Yeah, go ahead,
Anushka, please ask your question.
Namaskar Maharaj. My question is the death predetermined? If so, how can we win the fear of death?
Okay. In the book For Seekers of God, it contains teachings of Swami Shivananda Mahapurush Maharaj. In answer to one question, similar question, Mahapurush Maharaj said, 3 things are predetermined. Nobody can change them. What is first thing? Birth. We can't change the birth. Supposing I'm not happy with my parents, I can't change my parents. I'm already born. We come to know only after we are born. Birth cannot be changed, predetermined. Death cannot be changed, predetermined. Mahapurush Maharaj said, 3rd thing that cannot be changed is marriage. Birth, death, and marriage cannot be changed. 3 things. Second part of your question, how to overcome fear of death? The way to overcome all fear permanently forever is to experience the divine presence. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, I think it was Yajnavalkya who says, fear comes only because we perceive the second. Dvitiya dvaivayam bhavati. Only when you experience unitary consciousness in samadhi, no other second thing, only the self, then all fear will completely go away, permanently go away. Until then, the moment you perceive the second one, another person, another object, there is possibility of fear from that. Fear and other problems will come. So the complete, total, permanent solution to fear is God realization, self-realization. Otherwise, in the temporary, short-term measure, fear we can overcome by chanting the name of God. Gandhiji was very much afraid of darkness and ghosts. So he used to chant the name of Rama, that would give him strength. Chanting God's name, prayer, those things will help us to overcome fear. And about the fear of death, there is an incident, I don't remember the details. Swamiji was traveling somewhere in Europe. And then he had a meeting with one of the nobility, one of the Prince royal family members. Swamiji had a meeting. The royal family members in Europe asked Swamiji, all this Vedanta stuff that you are teaching, Swamiji, what is the good? If I follow the Vedanta that you are teaching, what benefit will I get? That was the question that man asked. This was Swamiji's reply was, if you follow Vedanta, when the moment of death comes, we'll be able to walk away with a trace of fear with a smile on your face. That's what Vedanta can do to you. So that was Swamiji's reply on how to overcome fear.
Very lovely. Swami, I think that brings us to an end of your talk, and we will Lakshmi, if you could turn off the recording button, mine doesn't seem to be working right now.
Yeah, sure, Mother.
So we will end with a waving of the lights and then a few brief announcements.
Sure, very good.